very cool game to show you today. It's called Eyes Beyond the Torchlight. This is the main rules here. It is a non-OGL game, since I know that's all the rage due to current events. And it's about 217 pages. This is a spiral-bound Lulu print, but you can also get it on Drive Through RPG. I'll have all the links down in the description. And let's take a look through it. It might be a little bit lengthy, but I want to tell you everything I can about this game and how its mechanics work, because I think they're very interesting. So you've got a glossary here, which I like that it's on one page, and it's going to have a lot of the terms that are unique to this game, obviously, is going to be in the glossary. And then what makes it different? So what it's going to be is it's going to be a d20, and then let's say you've got a stat die, and it's going to be, maybe it's a d4 for the stat you're rolling up. And your target number is going to be 12. So I roll that up. I got a 20 because I'm great. I got a 4 on the 4, so who knows? I definitely did it with that right there. So you're trying to get a 12 on a d20 with a stat die that adds to it. The game is player facing, meaning that most all rolls are made by the players. And I enjoy that as well. It's obviously something a lot of games are doing, and this does it very well. But you've also got something called a boost die or a setback die. So if you've got a boost die, we're making that same roll from before. I've rolled a 1, so that's not good. And then this is going to be my stat die of a 2. So I got 1, 2, 3, 5 is 8. I didn't do it. So this was a boost. Something happened that gave me a bit of a benefit. But this could also be a setback die, and that's 5 is subtracted from my roll. So you've got kind of a positive and a negative die that might be involved in your roll. And the standard target number is 12. So that's what we're trying to get, is 12s. And you've got 4 stat dice. You've got brawn, agility, intellect, and presence. It can go from a d4 all the way up possibly to a d12. So that's very cool. And so it's got damage. So this one thing that I really think is neat. So let's say we've got a d4 and a d20. We're making a offensive roll, either melee or ranged. What's going to happen is, let's say I rolled better than that. I rolled a 12 and this is a 1. This is my stat die. I do 1 point of damage. That's how it works. Your stat die is going to be what your damage is when you do damage. So in their example here, a character attempts to shoot an opponent with a TN of 1. So a TN is going to be a threat number, and that's going to be something, it's not like armor, but it's something it takes away from the roll that you're trying to make. And it's talked about right here. So rolling a d20 and their agility stat dice of d6, rolling an 11 and a 2. So if this was an 11, and of course it's going to take me forever to find it, and this was a 2 that you can see there, and that's going to be a 13 minus the threat number of 1 for a total of 12. That's a success. So the damage done to the opponent is 2 hit points, the 2 from the agility stat dice of the roll. So within that roll, you could have a boost, a setback, you could have your damage die right there doing damage, and you're hoping to get a 12. And then the threat number is something that maybe the monster is going to have against you to reduce it down. But there's also a different way to do it, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later. So here's the boost and setbacks. If something is helping you, you're going to get a boost. If something is hurting you, you're going to get a setback. And then you've got hero and villain points. It's a meta currency that they can spend, the players can, to affect the game. And each player starts each game session with a set of 5 hero points. But there's also villain points, are possessed by main villains. And the GM can spend them to complicate the players' lives for a bit. There are edges and hindrances. Fairly obvious what those are going to be. Things your character is good at, things that might hold your character back. And then there's simplified spell casting. It uses a simple system for powers, whether they be spells, psionics, or superpowers. The Eyes Beyond the Torchlight, there are a limited number of magical powers, also called spells. Casting these powers requires a casting roll. Casting rolls are made using either intellect for mage powers or presence for cleric powers. And some spells are affected by the stat dice of the casting roll, and we'll be seeing those in its section. And then, of course, there are simplified stats, those 4 stats of brawn, agility, intellect, and presence. And then it goes into the basic rules. Now, one thing I want to say about this book, which is interesting, and I do like, is that it pretty much tells you all the rules to play the game before you get to making your character. I know that lots of times it's fun to have a book where it immediately shows you a character. Who can I play as? Who can I be? Um, and that's all well and good. But here's chapter 5, the character creation right here. So it lets you read about the rules and then figure out what type of character you want to make, because now you've read the rules and hopefully you have a better sense of how the rules work and to how to make your character exactly the way you want it. So it's going to reiterate the basic die mechanic, the target number of 12. There's checks, defenses, and offenses. And of course, you're going to be rolling against yourself whenever a creature attacks you. Using powers here, it's going to be pretty much the same format, a d20 plus the relevant stat. You may have a boost or a setback, and of course, you're going to subtract the threat number of the NPC or monster, and you're going to always be looking for a 12. Some rules on when you should roll and when you shouldn't roll. And then it's going to break down the stats, and there's also some derived stats as well. Armor subtracts from incoming damage. Of course, you've got your hit points. They're based on the character's maximum bronze stat die. So if you've got a D8, you have 8 hit points. If you have a D4 in brawn, you have 4 hit points. You have your initiative is an intellect roll. You have move, which is based on the character's ancestry, and then you have a run, which is a run. Run is a move plus the character's agility die. So it's going to, the more agility that you have, the further you'll be able to run. So this is a great little thing here. It shows what checks you make with these different stats, offense and defense that you might make with those different stats. Very easy. During the game, you're going to get advancement points, and you can spend them to raise stats or to gain new edges. A character's stats cannot be higher than D10 or lower than 0 unless they have an edge that allows them to raise a stat to D12. Some powerful magical items can even raise a stat to a D12. And you've got kind of a dice chain like you'd find in DCC. 0, D4, D6, D8, D10, D12. And then some abilities might increase your dice type, exactly like kind of DCC, where you're going up the dice chain. So if something raises your dice type beyond D12 in steps, starts with D12 plus 1 and then D12 plus 2, so it's going to go all the way up. And of course, if a stat goes below 0, a character is most often dead. And then it's going to really break it down again about the target number. I like how it has average dice rolls here. If you've got a D20 plus a D4, your average dice roll is going to be a 13. With a D6, it's going to be a 14. Very cool. Now, one thing about it is that a lot of times target number is 12 and threat number is, they're a little bit kind of the same number, the same kind of thing with TN. So it's a little bit, might be a little bit confusing off the bat, but just make sure you say that the target is 12, and when it comes to TN, that means threat number. And all threat number is it's how difficult it is to accomplish any check, offense, or defense against them. So if a task requires some offense, the target number also determines hit points needed to accomplish the task. I think this is very smart. Every one threat number is 5 hit points. For instance, during a combat, a locked door may have a threat number of 2 and require 10 hit points of damage against it to open it. This damage could either be done with brawn, offense to break it down, or sheer strength, or to bash it down with a weapon, agility offense to pick the lock, or even intellect or presence offense to use powers to release the door lock. I think that's very smart. When is there a boost? When do you do setbacks? Boost could be, if you've got a certain item like a crowbar, you're using a great quality tool for a task. If there's an edge or background that gives you a boost, maybe when 3 or more players are ganging up on a single enemy, that's going to give you a boost. And then when do you get setbacks? Well, maybe the creature that you're fighting against it has flight. You do not have the proper tools. You have a hindrance. Maybe there's 3 or more enemies against you. Maybe you're paralyzed or prone or sleeping. Whatever the case may be, you get that setback die. So this almost reminds me a little bit of, like, it's D&D kind of. I mean, you've got a D20, which I don't know if that's really D&D. I mean, a lot of games use a D20. But it's a little bit like DCC with a dice chain. It almost reminds me of Fantasy Flight games' Star Wars games, where you have like a boost, and then you have this setback die. So it's kind of a little bit of a melange of all of them, but I think it's very smart. Monsters and NPC hit points are based on their threat number and size. You've got damage and offense. So other offense roles can also include powers such as intellect or presence. So again, it's going to be very easy. You're just D20 plus the applicable stat, and if it is success, the damage done is the stat dice of the successful roll, like we talked about. Should it be a check or offense? Hero points, telling you how to use those. What can you use them on? Heroes can use them to add a d8 to any roll. This can be done after the initial roll. That's very good. It's just fun to be able to know that you've got that in backup and you didn't waste it. Take an extra action at any time in the round. You can flee a combat without triggering any attacks against you. And then some powers can be empowered, making them stronger. But the villain can also use them to escape unharmed as well, to come back another day. Maybe it increases the villain's damage by 5 for a singular attack. Take an extra action, and of course, give the player's next roll a setback. And then time and movement. And again, much like many of the games nowadays, some of it has, especially for like range, you've got close, near, far, very far. It tells you in feet, it tells you in squares. You've got rounds, minutes, hours, days. Very easy to understand there. Rules for lights, dropping possibly, if you drop a torch on the ground, how long oil and torches last. For those without a light source, most actions will have a setback. And certain actions like ranged offenses will be an automatic failure. Rules here for resting and healing. You've got a recovery, and you've got breathers, short rest, and long rest. So a recovery is an action that can be taken during combat and replaces your other action during the round. To make a recovery action roll, a brawn check on a success 12 or more, you heal the amount of hit points on your brawn die. So you roll it up. Let's say you've only got a d4. Let's say you make it. I did not there, but I would get 4 hit points back. And you can do this as often as you wish in combat. It just takes up your action. So I think that's very cool to keep your character going. But again, taking up your action could make or break you, especially if you don't make this roll. Then you've got breathers. As long as there's a little chance of a second combat starting in moments, you can take a breather. Breathers are a minute or so to collect yourself, bandage larger wounds, and take a look at the damage of your teammates. So all you do is you roll your brawn die and regain that many hit points. And you can do this once after every combat. So I rolled a 4 there. We're looking good. Short rest, if you can take an hour-long rest in a safe and secure place, you can maybe heal a little bit, clean water and food. You're going to regain the maximum of your brawn dice in hit points. You cannot exceed your maximum hit points, of course, and you can only take 3 short rests in any 24-hour period. And then you've got a long rest, uninterrupted 8-hour period of sleep or rest. You gain all your hit points back, and you can only take one of those per 24 hours. And then you've got your rules for combat here. Rules for surprise checks using presence versus the threat number with the threat number. You've got initiative, which is an intellect check versus the opponent's threat number. Movement in combat, how to do pursuits, and then you're going to have your actions in combat. Pretty normal stuff: moving, disengaging, attacking, moving and attacking, making a combat roll. It's going to be d20 plus your brawn dice minus the threat number of the opponent to meet or beat 12. On a fail, your attack misses. On a success, the attack does damage to the opponent. The damage done is the brawn dice of the offense roll. And for ranged combat, the damage is going to be the agility dice of your attack roll. You also have dodge rolls. So when you're attacked by a creature, you're going to roll a d20 plus your agility dice, add them together, minus the opponent's threat number, and you need to meet or beat the target of 12. Shields raise the agility dice up by 1 step, going from a d6 to a d8. That's going to be very helpful. On a success, just an example. On a success, they dodge or otherwise block the attack. On a fail, they take damage. The amount of damage they take is reduced by the agility dice of the roll, subtracting that result from the monster or NPC's damage. So they do a set amount of damage. Here, Rarg has an agility of d6. When a goblin attacks him, John rolls d12 plus d6 for a 3 on the 20 and a 4 on the d6, so 7, minus the goblin's target number of 1 for a 6. He failed. So the goblin have a 6 in damage. The agility dice of the roll was a 4, so Rarg takes 2 damage. So even if you fail, you're still going to reduce the damage based off your agility dice. Of course, if you make it, you don't take any damage at all. So that's very cool. And then armor pretty much has 3 different ranges: 0, unarmored, all the way up to heavy armor. So in the above example, Rarg is wearing light armor, damage reduction of 1. He would of only taken 1 point of damage. If it was heavy armor, he would have taken 0 damage as the armor blocks all the incoming damage. And then you've got a minimum rule there. Shields. Wearing a shield increases your agility dice of the dodge rolls by 1 step, like we talked about, and that's very helpful. There's some rules for defensive fighting, offensive fighting, charging, everything you would like to know there that you'd want. Rules for mob rules, and then range combat, range, cover, and things like that. And of course, you're going to get stuff such as boosts and setbacks. A bunch of other combat rules, underwater, aerial, falling, all the stuff you need, opportunity attacks, what happens when you lose a stat. Here's a cool thing here. It's called escalation dice. So it's an optional rule, and if you want combat to go faster, you're going to start using a die. It says you'll need 2 6-sided dice. On round 1, set one of the dice on the table in view of the players with the number 1 facing up. You do not roll on round 1 because you cannot roll under a 1. At the beginning of the next round, change the dice to a number 2 facing up and roll your second dice. Again, in the open. If you roll under a 2, so just a 1, damage escalates. If you roll a 2 or over, nothing happens. Increase the dice of 1 each by 1 each until damage escalates. And when it does, start back at 1 again on the following round. So each time damage escalates, add an additional 2 points to any damage done on both sides of the combat. So start off at +2 damage on the first escalation, +4 on the second, +6 on the third, etc. That's very cool, and I've seen that in some other stuff. Once maybe some whiffs have happened and things are going on, maybe to make the combat go faster. Healing in combat, death and dying, replacing dead characters. A GM's guide here for creating NPCs. Talk about spellcasters, awarding advancements that you'll be able to spend. Using monsters from other games to try to help when it comes to size and damage, size and how far they run, and traits. And here's some old school stats here if you want to try to port over some other games into this system. And then we've got our character creation. So we've got our 4 stats. We're going to get our stat dice, and everything that you kind of know from that beginning section is going to be here. And so we have ancestries. So you're going to have the Dwarf Hindrance table. So they all kind of have their own hindrance based off their ancestry. So like for the Dwarf, you're going to take the edge, dark vision, you're going to get magic resistance. Actually, what it is you get dark vision, and you can choose one of the following 3 edges at character creation. You must roll 1d6 on the Dwarf Hindrance table and take that hindrance. So if you want one of these other 3, such as magic resistance, Monty Hauler, or Stone Flesh, which I think you would, you need to roll on one of these Dwarf Hindrances. I think it's a great system to decide whether or not you want to add a little bit more to your character. You've got elves, gnomes, halflings, half-elves, each with their own hindrance table, half-orcs, humans, so that's very helpful. And then you've got archetypes. There's 4 different archetypes: the cleric, the mage, the rogue, and the warrior. Pretty standard stuff. So it tells you what they can and can't have. They can take the following edges, such as divine spellcaster. So if you become a cleric, you take the divine spellcaster, and you can choose one of the following 3 edges at character creation, much like you could with the ancestries. As you'll also have to take a hindrance, and there's like a master list of hindrances. So you can get smite, healer, or disease immunity. I would go with the hindrances. It makes your character cooler, and it's going to give you neat abilities. I kind of like this silhouette here in the back of the character archetypes, which is classes, of course. So like a thief, they get all stealth and hiding rolls have a boost. You can see how easy that is. They get a back attack, and then they can disguise they can get a known power from either cleric or mages, but they're going to start off with that thief edge. And then you've got the major list here of hindrances. Some of them are pretty strong. It'll talk about them a little bit more in depth a little bit after. But you've got stuff like mute, pacifist, drunk, addiction, weak, slow, unaware. And then you've got a list of backgrounds here. And these are going to obviously help you with your character to kind of flesh them out. And they give you some definitions of how they are. And then you've got some gear, very easy. And then you've got powers. So mage powers and cleric powers, not a huge amount, but I think for a game like this, I think it sits well. Derived stats, advancement points, how to use those to gain edges and remove hindrances, which is also very good. And then you've got advancement tiers as you go up in level, in essence. And then they've got a great creation example here. I always love that when it goes through a character. So then you have all the list of edges, and some of these are very good, and there's a bunch of them, but alertness, boost rolls when making a surprise check, Here's armored. When wearing your chosen armor, your armor damage reduction is raised by 1 point. Artistic, boost rolls when appraising or creating art. Back attack, once per encounter, when attacking with a one-handed melee weapon, you can automatically hit and do damage. So it's just automatic. I really like that. Some stuff to make the game go fast. Blessed by the gods, you begin every session with 6 hero points instead of 5. So these are ways to really flesh out and make your character cool and unique. Holy Aura, Hurl Weapon, Great Eyesight, Great Hearing, Master of Shadows. Just some really neat stuff there. And then you're going to have the list of hindrances that you'll have. And a lot of these, of course, are going to give you a setback die, or like you cannot lie. You can never not lie, no matter the consequences. You have 1 less hero point with Cursed. Um, distrust magic. Rolls have a setback when socially interacting with mages. Dumb. You are weak of mind. You have 1 die type penalty to your intellect and cannot raise the intellect above D8. So you can see, obviously, to make your character unique with some cool hindrances. Rules here for armor. You're going to see the different damage reduction, how the shield raises up your dodge die, the price, and armor descriptions. Very easy stuff here. And so you're going to have certain traits for weapons. Blunt, small, or thrown. Some of them are going to be kind of big weapons that you'll need. Here's some stuff about gear. I like, of course, when it shows, explains what some of this gear is. Rules for encumbrance. And then you're going to go into the powers. Mages begin the game with 4 powers in their spell book, and clerics begin with 2 powers. And powers are chosen from a list available for each archetype. Then you can use advancement points to learn new ones, and you can use hero points to customize your powers. Such as this. Tarla uses a hero point and describes her glowing spear bolt as crackling with lightning. When she strikes a goblin, the other goblins nearby are all knocked prone in a wave of thunder. Very cool. You've got some cantrips. How to do the casting roll, the duration, empowering them. It's an optional rule. In some cases, a player may want to increase the power of a spell, such as turning more than 1d8 threat number of undead, summoning a threat number 5 animal, extending the radius of a detect spell, and more. In these cases, the GM can allow the player to spend a hero point to add extra damage to spells, increase the duration, maintain concentration, so forth. So very cool. And then casting spells requires a casting roll. On a spellcasting failure, it does not meet or beat 12. This spell is not cast, and the caster must pay a HP cost, losing a number of hit points equal to a roll on a d6. So that's detrimental, and I always like spells or spellcasting where it takes away from the spellcaster. Try either their stamina, their hit points, or whatever the case may be. Of course, those hit points can be covered normally, like in like normal ways, such as breathers or rests. Unlike other similar games, the amount of times a caster can cast spells in a day is not limited to X amount of times. It's limited by the amount of health in the form of hit points the caster currently has. I like that. That's going to make playing a mage very push your luck, deadly possibly with that roll, and that's going to be cool. Burning the power requires no casting roll, but that power cannot be cast again until the caster finishes a long rest. So there's no chance of failure. You can burn that power just to do it. Certain powers have ill effects when the caster rolls a natural 1 on both dice, meaning their stat die and the d20. And then you've got a list of spells here, and it's going to show you, of course, the duration, that it's a mage or a cleric power, what the target number is. If it says cast versus target number, a Y or an N. A Y indicates the casting roll is versus the target's threat number. A N indicates the casting roll is versus 12. And of course, a brief description of the spell. Then you've got a lot of monsters. You've got their threat number. You've got their hit points. If you want to roll to calculate a monster's hit points. Monster recovery actions. They can also heal as well in the middle of combat. Damage that they do. It's going to be a set number here. And then their move. Everything else they need, their size, appearance, and traits. And so you've got, starting off right at the bat, you can see the stat thing. Now here, this has got a 10, so its threat number is a 10. Or if you want, you can get rid of that 10, and you're going to add that to the number that you need. So in essence, it's going to be a 20 is what your new target number is in order to hit the creature. It's just a different way for you to do it. So it either has 50 hit points, or if you want to roll it up, 10d10, and it does 10 points of damage. and then it's different traits. So that's just the opposite way of doing it there if you want, but that's going to make it so that the actual target is not going to be 12, but it's going to be 20 for this creature. And then you can see there's a good selection here of creatures. I like the art. I like the stat blocks. They're very easy. You're able to get a lot in the back of the book here because we're just in the C's. There's the D's. There's dragons, whale snail, genies, gargoyles, Gerberine Mouther, goblins, gray ooze, green slime. You're getting a lot. I think that's really cool. And then, really, I expected this book kind of to be over after this point. You know how we kind of get to the monster section. But I mean, look, it keeps on going. They're giving you a lot of stuff. There may not be a huge amount on just the appearance and their traits. That, they're really giving you a lot, but not really filling out full. This is not like a second edition Monstrous Manual where it tells you all about how they live and how their society is and stuff like that. But this is definitely a game that I think that it would be good for new players, but if you've played role-playing games before, and I mean, we're still going on Monsters, so I'm very impressed with that. This would be a game that you would kind of already know. Then you've got treasures, and I like this. There's unique treasures here with magical weapons and armor. Like this one, like a +1 weapons. The most common magical weapons are simple +1 weapons. They can be any weapon and grant a 1 dice type to offense when used. They grant a +2. It's the same thing. Much like the +1 weapons, they can be any weapon but grant a 2 dice type bonus to offenses. So you're going to go up. So if it was a D6 weapon, it's now a D8 weapon, in essence. I guess I should say your stat is going to go up. You've got some rings here, potions, magical items. A great example of play, very helpful. And then you've got a small little campaign setting here, the border surrounding the Woldspire and the surrounding lands. It gives you a little bit about the borderlands here, starting you off hopefully with maybe an adventure you can come up with, or work off something here in the book, telling you about the citizens, the forests, the plains and swamps, lakes and rivers. And this was something that probably, in my opinion, didn't need to be here. This is actually very cool that they give you a bit of a setting so you can go ahead and start playing. Telling you about the different peoples, the religion and magic, the calendar, very cool, minor gods and goddesses, a great map, especially here with the, I think with the spiral bound version of it, different languages, special days, the currency, and then D20 campaign hooks, and then a couple of cool maps here of some of the areas that they talk about. And then this is a small dungeon, so I was like, wow, this is really great. The Lost Tomb. And so I don't want to spoil too much of that. There's a cool adventure there in the back with the dungeon and a great piece of map art there. Wandering monsters, the dungeon key, and stuff like that. So to me, this is a really full package. There's some new monsters that are kind of introduced into it, such as this armored skeleton, holy guardian, and the succubus, and then the map that's not keyed up there. So that is Eyes Beyond the Torchlight. And I'm going to wrap it up by saying I think this game is really cool. I think it probably deserves a lot more attention. It's very difficult, obviously, to get some games out there so people can see. So I hope this video has been very helpful for you in checking this game out. I think it's got a lot going for it. I think if you like a game kind of like Savage Worlds, if you like normal fantasy games as well, if you like a little bit of DCC, again, I see a little bit of glimpses of Fantasy Flight's Star Wars game with the boost and setback die. It does some really cool stuff. Player facing, non-OGL. It's got a campaign. It's got an adventure. It's got tons of monsters, as you saw. It's got some great edges to make your character unique. And I think it's a neat hybrid almost of, like I said, a typical OSR type game, Savage Worlds a little bit, and Fantasy Flight Star Wars. So there it is. Like I said, I'll have a link down in the description. I hope this has been very helpful for you. Please check this game out. Like I said, it's available on ttrpg as well as Lulu for this spiral bound version. I'll have all the links, like I said, down in the description. But this is a very cool game. And this is a game I feel like, I hope there's some more stuff that's going to come out for it. But really, this is another game that, you can just grab, and it's not hard to learn whatsoever. It's definitely in the vibe of kind of what's going on nowadays with player-facing games, and it can do a lot of cool stuff. I didn't see really anything that struck me as odd. The only thing is just make sure you're saying the target is 12 and the TN means threat number. I think some people could possibly get a little bit confused about those two things. But that's it. I think it's a very neat game. I like the name of it, Eyes Beyond the Torchlight. And yeah, I hope that this video has been helpful. Check this game out. And I hope you'll stay tuned for some new videos that I'm going to have coming. And thank you.